and welcome everyone to Simple's November webinar. My name is Jess Spiro. I am the content lead and digital editor for Simple, and on behalf of the Simple team, I'd like to thank you all for tuning in today. For those who don't know, Simple is a knowledge, data, and access provider to the next generation of family offices. And today we'll be discussing technology to optimize family office operations and what it means to become a digital-first family office. Moderating this discussion on behalf of Simple is Kyle Macdonald. Kyle is a creative strategist, business designer, and venture builder, and forms part of Simple's expert network. Kyle will be joined by our panel, made up of experts from leading technology and software providers. The discussion will center broadly around the panelists' expertise and experience of working with family offices, as each presents a unique perspective on some of the challenges and opportunities often seen here. Today, we're joined by Rob Mallernee, founder and CEO of Eton Solutions, Sinan Biren, head of sales for Canopy, Guillaume Desclée, CEO of Abbove, Leo Morris, heading up sales at Addepar UK, and Albert Fox, CEO and co-founder of Performativ. Gents, thank you all for being here today. You each represent just a slice of what this incredible ecosystem has to offer, and we're looking forward to hearing what rich expertise and fresh insight you have to share with us. That's all from me. Over to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Jess, for laying the gauntlet of a very exciting conversation today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. As mentioned, my name is Kyle, and we are going to be going on a bit of an adventure, exploring the opportunities and challenges for a digital-first family office. I'll give you an agenda of what it is you can expect. We're going to be finding out a little bit about each of the companies that we're in discussion with today. We then will look into how it is they're solving what they're solving, and where they think the market might be going in the future as well. But then we will move quite swiftly on to some of the requirements and considerations that family offices have when it comes to thinking about becoming digital first. We're also then going to begin looking at onboarding and customization. So once a family office does begin to make that consideration of becoming digital first, we'll look at the support required to ensure that that's a seamless process as they evolve and become sort of digitally mature. We will also then look at data and security. And then finally, we will dive into where we think wealth tech as a general market trend might be going in the future, and what it is that these exciting organizations are working on. So I'm going to kick off by asking the same question to all of you, and I'll sort of call you out one by one. I'll start with Rob. So if you could tell us a little bit about who you are, what company it is you work for, what problem you're solving, and how you're solving that.
Okay. Thanks, Kyle. I'm Rob Mallernee. I'm the founder and CEO of Eton Solutions. Also the founder of a large multifamily office, which is really where we created Eton Solutions. The problem we're trying to solve was when we created our own multifamily office, we really couldn't find technology to operationalize that office. We've done extensive process mapping, and we built our technology to be able to enable us to run a highly efficient operation that allowed us to take advantage of technology, as well as mitigate a lot of the risks that are involved in running single or multifamily offices. So we've created a fully integrated platform that handles infrastructure, a cloud-native infrastructure for safety, security, a process layer that has a built-in workflow engine, document management, CRM, to handle the processes within the office, and then all the applications that are typically thought of, or a lot of the applications, general ledger, investment performance, trust accounting, fund accounting, within that universe of applications that are needed to run a family office. And
Brilliant.
so we've
Great. And perhaps moving on to Sinan, if you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, which company you're from, what problem you're solving, and how you solve that.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So my name is Sinan. I'm with Canopy. The genesis of Canopy came from its founder, who was a high net worth individual himself. And he realized that investment data was quite fragmented, which is actually pretty much the same experience as we see across our clients, such as family offices. When I say fragmented, I'm talking about, having to deal with aggregation of data, cleaning it, and then making sense of it, right? And in an ideal world, the data would be in the same consistent format, but unfortunately, it's not the reality. So the poor family offices, if I may use the term poor, get exposed to data in PDF, CSV, API, Excels, you name it, right? So somehow they need to be able to aggregate all that and then to actually produce clean, reliable reports, which would meet their clients' expectation. That's pretty much how Canopy was formed. And yeah, we've been ticking since 9 years, and very happy to join, and thanks for the opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you. Perhaps over to you, Guillaume. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what your company does, what problem you're solving, and how you solve it.
All right, Kyle. Thank you very much. Happy to be here. I'm Guillaume Desclée, CEO and founder of Abbove, which is a collaborative wealth planning platform for financial advisors and the family they serve. We have about 1,000 advisors using the platform, serving 27,000 families, approx a bit more than 100,000 family members. What we do, we are digitalizing the family offices services, meaning that we collect and organize the wealth information of families into a clear data model. And out of that data model, we're connecting a financial advising tool to help the advisor to have a better advice, more relevant and accurate advice, and deliver his client with a full digital experience of the family office services.
Fantastic. Thank you. And over to you, Leo. Tell us a little bit about who you are, which company it is you're working for, the problem you're solving, and how you're solving that.
Thanks for that, Carl. Leo Morris. I work at Addepar, representing Addepar's expansion from the US into Europe. So I was the first employee over the summer to join the team here in London, covering Europe and the UK. So Addepar is a data aggregation platform, which enables you to collate all of your financial assets, whether they're public assets, private assets, or real assets. And then we overlay a reporting solution on top of that, but we allow for analysis. We have a trading platform as well, where you can trade in and out of private funds and private markets. And then we have a portfolio projection tool where you can combine your private assets and your public assets, apply capital market assumptions, and then do cash flow modeling and the like out into the future to make sure you've optimized your balance sheet for the liquidity you have. And we were incepted in the family office space in 2009. We have just over 800 clients, $4 trillion of assets on the platform. And most of those, the majority of those, are in the single family and multifamily office space.
Fantastic, thank you. Albert, on to you. Last but not least.
Thank you very much. My name is Albert Fox, and I represent Performativ here with you today. Performativ was kind of built by my co-founder and I as we went out and looked for wealth management tools that allowed us to do the projections and portfolio analysis that we had seen with institutional investors, with the large asset management firms, tools that kind of came in bundles that were way too kind of complex to set up and run, large monolithic systems that required millions of euros in total cost of ownership to run and maintain. So instead, we looked at ways to optimize the compute required for those resources, and we make Performativ a wealth management platform built very much for the serious investor, capable of handling derivatives and non-listed assets in all of its forms in a relatively modern and software as a service-based contract.
Excellent. Well, definitely surrounded by a very knowledgeable and exciting group of people here today. Perhaps diving then deeply, and I'm going to ask this question to you, Rob. when a family office is beginning to make the consideration to become digital first, what do you sort of see as a bit of the, I suppose, the paradigm shift required to be able to sort of transition to being digital first?
I think the employee readiness, thinking about how you do things, thinking about the idea that I think overcoming some of the apprehensions about technology. I think a lot of folks, especially in the family office world, think about technology as a replacement for people. And I think really having the proper paradigm is that there are things that technology does exceptionally well. And the beauty of that is that most of the things that technology does exceptionally well are things that humans don't do well. And the things that humans do well are things that technology does not do well. And so I think adapting the idea that technology is not here to replace people, technology is here to enable people to operate at a higher level, is really the number one kind of thought process that we think is critical. I think the other piece of this is that you really need to think about process. So our whole technology platform, before we built the technology, we really created a process map of the family office with about 250 sub-processes to really understand what was happening and then be able to figure out which of those things can be automated, how do you automate them, and then thinking through those steps to make sure that we're not just trying to use technology in a way to automate the old way, but really leverage technology to change how we do things so that we can do things in a whole different way going forward. And I think that requires that everybody in the family office their job is to change. So managing that change and helping people think through why this is good for them, why this is an advantageous thing, is really critical when you're starting to think about what are your considerations. I think a lot of people start with the nuts and bolts. It really probably should start with the process and the people first before you get to the technology.
Great. And then perhaps a question for you, Leo, on obviously Addepar is making the shift and move to beginning to sort of expand into the UK and Europe as it begins to kind of focus in on the family office market a bit. It would be great to understand what it is that you think is driving the demand for services like Addepar. Why are family offices sort of turning to solutions like yours?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think there's been, especially in the US, when we look at the markets over there, the private markets, and how they run their portfolios, it's very much been done in a slightly more complex way with a lot more exposure to private investments, alternatives, and then they have a lot of relationships with multiple custodian banks. So aggregating that data becomes an incredibly important thing. And obviously, with the talent of tech people and software building ability that's come out of the US, I think it's natural to expand overseas. I think Europe, by a few metrics, is maybe 10 years behind the US in terms of their ability to build best of breed SaaS and software products. So it's only been natural with the size of the market in Europe to expand companies such as Addepar and many others overseas, and there's been a demand for it run out of the US, but now we've got a presence here. I think it will only go from there. So very excited to start talking.
Great. And then perhaps for you, Guillaume, is the question around the role and the shifting role of the advisor. We sort of are increasingly seeing how advisors are changing their relationship with family offices, and potentially also how family offices themselves are changing their relationship with advisors. It would be really interesting to see how you think that might be driving some of the move towards a more digital, automated future.
What we see is there is a big change in the type of clients family offices are serving. There is this big wealth transfer. We all know the baby boomers are now transferring their wealth to a younger generation. And there's a change then in mentality. And it requires, I believe, to rethink the way you are delivering financial advice and services. So what we're doing, we go for a more holistic approach on the client. We try to move from traditional finance, which is needed, but it is very rational, to more holistic finance. It means adding some emotion on it, understanding the person as a whole, and then trying to find, well, to understand the person, sure, the client on his financial situation, his wealth situation, but also on the goals he has in life, and the family situation, family structure, and then to design solution according to this global picture of the client. So we believe it is really needed now to move from that pure rational approach to a holistic approach, and that's what we try to do by having a global understanding on the client and his wealth, and start entering in a more deep relationship with the client to offer such a global advice. So that's I think we observed, yes.
Maybe then a question for you, Sinan, around getting tactical. What is it that you think should be sort of a core function from being digital? So basically, what is something that you think is 100% that family offices should have as a digital offering today? And then as a value add, where could they sort of aim in the future?
Yeah, so we see that there's quite a bit of resistance, especially in some jurisdictions, right? So I'm not going to name a few, but I'm guessing you might be guessing where these are. So getting 100% digital is a big goal, but we had the same sort of resistance with cloud. People are being against SaaS products and so forth. And look where we are right now, right? So obviously it's inevitable, this will come. But if you were to ask our opinion on what's going to be as digital as possible, we think that the probably investment reporting would be the fastest. The reason being is that we see some initiatives like open wealth, open banking, even some regulations in this space where data becomes more easily available and standardized, where third-party vendors like us could consume and generate on the backs of it reports. Sadly, though, generating financial statements and expense analysis, we believe that will still take a few years for it to become digital. So hopefully investment reporting becomes as digital as it become in the near future. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, perhaps at this point we'll sort of start thinking a little bit about as a family office begins to move from kind of the consideration and requirement, as they begin to kind of move into the onboarding and customization. So understandably, having spent several years in the family office space, there is often a nervousness around adoptions and changing things that work well. Family offices have optimized their processes and ways of working incredibly well to be able to sort of run as efficient organizations. What sort of advice might you give a family office who's a bit nervous when it comes to adopting and onboarding onto a new platform or service?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle. For us, whenever we pitch a client, making them at ease is always kind of a multi, step process. And typically the way that we found and identified works best is by, sitting down and finding a provider that's willing to maybe work alongside your current flow, maybe, lowering the potential chance of something going wrong, making sure that all the processes are aligned with the provider and that they at least have a pretty good explanation to why you should potentially alter one. Running a proof of concept next to a software supplier is relatively less intrusive than just switching from one day to another, and making sure that you can kind of do a concurrent or a simultaneous deployment next to your current processes is typically something that eases our potential clients quite a bit.
Perfect. And Rob, when it comes to implementation, how does Eton sort of think about sort of managing that effectively so that, ultimately clients are put at ease and risks are mitigated?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the key thing is to really think about the implementation, have a very well thought out process that's well communicated at the beginning to the client. I think having the ability to, one of the, I think, learnings that we've had in doing this for a while is if you try to do all of the family office in lockstep, do the first step for everybody, the second step, that you create a huge amount of anxiety because nothing is done until everything is done. So I think taking a kind of a Scrum approach where you take a pilot project for 2 or 3 legal entities maybe, or 4 or 5, one family, and you work that all the way through from the beginning to the end, it's going to help you really learn a lot about that family office. So doing some work on what is the as-is process, how do they operate today, so that you really understand how they think about the world, what their paradigm is, and then mapping out a to-be process that's going to involve changes in the paradigm as well as adopting the actual technology. But there's process change, there's technology change, and then doing a small set of implementation across a very small universe of 5% of their family office first allows them to see, oh, now I understand how all this is going to work. I think the other critical thing is that you have to remember when you're doing an implementation, all of the people involved from the client side have a full-time job already. So one of the things we do is we try to staff as much of the implementation work ourselves as is humanly possible. Obviously, we need to get information and data from the client, but we try to do as much of that heavy lifting as we can, because it's unreasonable to believe that somebody can, spend a huge amount of time doing an implementation and keep the the car rolling down the highway at the same time. So I think those are a couple of the key things we think about.
Brilliant. And Leo, when we begin thinking a little bit about, I suppose, customization and personalization for family offices, obviously no organization is the same. How does sort of Addepar approach ensuring that the right features are sort of plugged into the right family office?
Yeah, I think a lot of the key with that side of things is to make sure there are guardrails in place, to make sure the platform isn't so entirely customizable that you go down a rabbit hole and it's completely bespoke for every case. And then if a key person isn't in office, someone else can pick it up. So we do allow a lot of customization within set parameters. I think with setup, that's extremely important because many providers, many SaaS-based providers will push updates monthly, weekly, biannually, for example, and to make sure that those are all produced in the right way and how the original team and the original software provider wants those to be, you need to make sure there aren't going to be breakages. So having flexibility within those guardrails is key. But everyone's going to want stuff customized, make it personalized, which is incredibly important for the reporting experience, for the investment experience, and for analysis. But I think education around the team who are going to implement and setting the expectations about what they want out of it is key to set that up, and then for them to know what within what parameters can things be amended and changed to suit their needs.
Great. Guillaume, maybe sort of just some sort of final thoughts on that. Are there anything that you sort of think help you to sort of ensure that this process is well managed?
Yeah, adding a little thing on it, we are operating in very different kind of environment, like private banks or small, mid-sized family offices. So it's very, very broad. But what I see when you talk about digital transformation, it is clearly 20% technology, 80% methodology. So I fully agree with Robert on this. And it is really about understanding the current processes of the company, how they work, and then only, like Leo said, how your technology will improve what needs to be improved in that process, not changing everything. So I think that's really key, on top of having the staff, as Robert said, and a real dedication from the management. This is absolutely key.
We have some questions in the chat before we move into the next section. Todd, you have a particularly interesting question. Do you have a framework, mind map for family options what should family offices and RIAs be considering? What are the top 20% to focus on? Rob, I think you had an interesting point of view on this.
Yeah, we actually have a what we call a process decomposition chart that it fits on a 4-foot by 6-foot piece of paper, where we take everything you do in the family office and decompose it down into smaller and smaller processes. And that might be operations, it might be investments, it might be accounting, it could be, you know, partnership accounting, it could be marketing. And so we've tried to think about everything that you might want to do in a family office, and then looking at that universe of things, each different family office has to decide which of these things are we going to offer, which are we not. For the things that we're going to offer, which of these things do we want to do ourselves, which things could be automated, which things could be outsourced to somebody else who maybe has a better skill set in that particular activity. And where to start, I think, really depends on the type of office that you're running. I would start with whatever is the driving force in your office. And as we all know, there are accounting focused offices, there are planning focused offices, and there are investment focused offices. So I think where to start really depends on where your staff are spending most of their time and where you feel there is the most inefficiency or the most risk. Because, you know, when we started this, what we really focused on first was what could go wrong and where do I want to mitigate the really big risks that are kind of obvious in a family office world. And so it's not always to focus on what you might think, you know, but rather what are those key areas: cybersecurity, transaction processing, those kind of things are pretty high risk that might want to be at top of the list for focus.
Definitely something to, we'll be circling back on shortly. Sinan, would be great to hear a little bit about, I suppose, that support that Canopy offers for family offices as they begin to kind of transition into adopting, more cloud-based services. What can they expect?
Absolutely. So Kyle, as mentioned, right, so we see that investment data is quite fragmented for family offices. So they have to some sort of aggregate the data, clean, and then make sense of it. And the data they get exposed to is in different data formats, such as PDF, Excel, and so forth. Now, the problem there is that some of these data formats, like PDF and Excel, is not machine readable. Especially if we're talking about the alternative space. Pretty much the fund fact sheets that you would be receiving from your fund admin would be in a PDF. So somehow the family office needs to figure out how to actually punch in that data into the reporting solution they're using. We have seen in the market that there are a couple of different solutions. Obviously, you could hire an outsourced shop which could do that for you manually. B, obviously, you could type it in manually. That's another option in the family office. Or you could use a technology which could actually automatically process the PDFs and convert it into a machine readable format, which should really, in reality, streamline that whole workflow for you. Now, this would be a kind of support that we would be doing for our clients. So we would be supporting them with punching in the data, data wrangling, aggregation, and so forth. We believe that this would really add value to the client so that they could actually concentrate on what really matters for them. So whether if it's like, client management or opportunity seeking, asset allocation, and so forth, and just outsource what is mundane stuff and which wouldn't really add value to the client. That's how we see it's happening right now.
Great. And Albert, it'd be very interesting to hear from your experience at Performativ, what are sort of some of the common blockers that clients experience as they begin to kind of adopt new solutions into their workflow? How are you sort of mitigating some of those frustrations?
So obviously there are tons, and I think one of the ones that Sinan just touched upon is how different data can look like when it comes from a custodian of a brokerage firm. So at least we've taken an approach where our clients are typically hundreds of thousands of legal entities and across everything from 1 to 200 different custodians active in one shop. So for us, it's been very much a handholding process in making sure that our clients are supported in every way of making sure that a data feed is enabled. And then for us, we accept the risk of those integrations with brokerages, no matter kind of what the deal might look like. And that also means that as we see breaks, and sometimes, especially the smaller banks, all of a sudden you expect files delivered in the early morning, and then nothing is delivered at 6 a.m. So then, on behalf of all of our clients, we will kind of nurture the relationship to the brokerages and to the custodians, which means that, we speak not with the voice of one single family office, but typically with, hundreds of different family offices.
Great. And Leo, I suppose, from a long-term perspective, what typical sort of, ROI, sort of impact of adopting solutions like yours could a family office expect to have?
Yeah, I guess unlike a huge business like Salesforce will say it drive more, 45% more revenues closed as a result of Sales Cloud, or 57% more customer cases were closed as a result of Service Cloud. I guess our metrics are more around people who are able to make sort of more informed investment decisions as opposed to all the data they get at their fingertips. So whether that's just seeing all of your assets in one place and being able to make asset allocation decisions off the back of that, or perhaps looking, when you can apply your capital market assumptions to a portfolio projection tool, seeing where you might have too much cash on your balance sheet, for example. So the metrics, obviously time saved from manual processes coming from the likes of Excel and PowerPoint, from the endless flexibility, from the key man risk, and some of the sort of, the walls that people build around it being their thing. So a lot of the return is time back, time able to be spent on more thoughtful investment decisions, and then time spent on this multifamily office acquiring more business, and if it's a single family office, capital preservation, for example, and making more informed investment decisions. So that's what sort of a tool like ours would help you have a more holistic picture in that way.
Brilliant. And maybe, Guillaume, I could ask you a similar question. It'd be great to hear a little bit about kind of the ROI of becoming a bit more holistic in your thinking.
Yeah, so we observe like short-term revenues directly by invoicing this kind of new services. That's something that comes very quickly. But in terms of long-term return on investment, as Leo said, like just having this global understanding, the holistic picture of the client leads to many business opportunities in terms of product, in terms of advice you can offer. So it creates other type of revenues, but also it helps you keep the relationship with the client over time. Digitalizing and offering this service to clients is helping to fighting churn. So it's not only about earning money; it's about not losing money. So I think that's really important to have in mind. And also in terms of acquisition, for sure, like you can distinguish your offer like by being digital, having new clients, but also you can go into the family structure of your clients. So you go by being digital. We know that it's very hard to keep the next gen as a client. So by offering this digital offer, it helps you to acquire new clients going over generation.
Brilliant. And Albert, again, similar question for you. I know that this is something that you particularly are looking at the moment. It'd be great to get your point of view on this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kyle. I mean, just following in the footsteps of Leo and Guillaume, which I think both put it extremely well. For us, I think the main reason why, firms inbound leads come to us is because that, they might have started out their family office with 2 or 3 family members, 2 or 3 clients. And as you probably can expect, at least the smaller ones in the audience, growing that number of clients to 50, or after that maybe 100. I think in the very early brief of this stream, we talked about what the role of a family office looks like and how that changes in the future. And obviously, so I think many of the family offices listening in have realized this, that not one client is the same, and clients are beginning to demand more and more complex and probably different approaches to their investments. So for us, making sure that there is actionable insights into your portfolios, making sure that you surveillance, not batching, looking at one client every month, but making sure that the system automatically notifies you when something looks out of order, when something needs to be rebalanced, when metric rules are being broken. Stuff that helps you surveillance not just 5 portfolios, but when you grow to 50 or 500 portfolios, making sure that happens in a MiFID compliant way for the Europeans that are listening in, and making sure that happens in a at least a very well thought out regime is extremely important to driving investments and allocation decisions for family offices.
Great. And Sinan, it'd be really interesting to hear, I suppose, as we begin to think a little bit more about data and security, how it is that, family offices should be thinking about data and security these days. It's obviously key as they expand to new territories. It'd be great to get your views on this in general.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Not sure if you actually looked into my family book, but my wife is actually a cybersecurity consultant at a bank, a Swiss bank. So thanks. So I get enough exposure to this topic daily. So if you look at the fundamentals, right? So data security is basically how are the systems protected from unauthorized access to data, and how you safeguard your systems from malware, virus threats, and so forth. So the data privacy actually goes on top of data security. So once we have the data security in place, then we're looking at where the controls should be added for unauthorized access to protect personal data. Now, family office data security basically are in possession of sensitive data, similar to that larger organizations. However, their data security controls are much less stringent than most large organizations. This is particularly because they typically rely on a small number of staff compared to large organizations, which means that the data is often less segregated and more exposed to than that it is in larger organizations. So what could you do? Well, basic precautions such as segregated or disproportionate effect in preventing cyber attacks. For example, simply implementing strict password policies, which you might think that should come by default, but trust me, it does not. Or keeping your antivirus software up to date could be a huge benefit. And of course, the family offices should be maybe unaware, but the family members' personal information could be publicly available, meaning it could be easier for people to realize that the fraudsters could actually piece it together to disparate data points, steal identities, and launch sophisticated criminal attacks. So what I'm trying to say is basically a further factor for the family members that are trying to be the early adapters of these leading edge technologies, including connected devices. Just be careful because they might not have these robust protections against cybersecurity.
Excellent. It'd be sort of on a similar topic and similar vein around sort of security and data. It'd be really interesting to hear, Leo, some of your points of view on being a data controller and sort of the data processing and the privacy and regulation around that. How does Addepar think about that, and how are your clients thinking about that?
Yeah, no, it's obviously very topical, and I think a lot of it starts with education around the difference between on-premise solutions and cloud-based solutions, and then multi-tenancy and how that really impacts security. Whether you're a data controller or a data processor, whether you're actually the one who's in charge of the final resting state or whether you're merely transiting from one place to another place is very important. Our philosophy at Addepar is to partner with well-known best-of-breed partners for the likes of AWS for servers. I think a lot of family offices, obviously, like all enterprises, alike would say, their privacy and their security is first and foremost because they have incredibly sensitive clients, and that's not specific to a firm of any size, but everyone. I think when it comes to servers, it's a slightly antiquated attitude that everything's got to be on site, secure, private, and if it can't be where I can see it, it needs to be at least in my country of residence. And then the interpretation of certain regulations around FINMA and the like, and GDPR, for example, I think people immediately think, well, it's got to be it's got to be co-located to my company, it's got to be in the country, but actually it can often be very much more secure to have that data elsewhere, based on multi-tenancy and technology and how advancements have taken place in that space. So that is our philosophy, but again, it's not always an easy point to get across.
Yeah, nice. Well, there's two interesting questions in the chat. I'm going to sort of highlight those. I'm going to start with Jessica's first. So what is your perspective on the readiness of the family office landscape to digitize their consolidating activities, as most financial institutions are not yet ready to provide the needed data on an automated base? Anyone interested in taking a stab at that? Rob, over to you.
Yeah, I think the readiness of the family office is really dependent on their relationship with their financial institution. And I think, obviously what everybody on this call is doing is taking data from dozens, if not hundreds of different data sources, normalizing and standardizing that data, pulling it into some sort of a system that is then going to be hopefully able to allow you to consolidate across multiple legal entities, accounts, etc. Our experience is that a lot of that data is available from, and especially from the larger financial institutions. If you're dealing with smaller local financial institutions, it may be a little more difficult, depending on your particular fact pattern. But as I think Sinan said at the beginning, there are ways to get data from anywhere. And, I think having a perspective that for the larger, more sophisticated institutions, this can all be automated. For the smaller institutions or for private equity and other illiquid assets, you may have to have a different way to get that data in. But I think it's really understanding the breadth of the data sources, and that not all of those are going to be automatable immediately, but there is a way to efficiently organize that data, bring it in, normalize and standardize it so that you can do consolidations. And I really think that's what everybody on this call, that every one of these businesses has to do that.
And I think in order to stay ahead of the curve, just to jump in quickly, no one is ever going to be in a perfect state of readiness. No one's ever going to have all of their ducks in a row, and that's a fantastic situation to perhaps be in. But if you want to stay ahead of the curve and you want to get better information than the next family office or than the next bank, at some point you've got to take a bit of a jump. Maybe you're not quite ready, but you'll help develop that product and you'll give feedback to these nimble fintech providers who will be able to then push those future desires to you, and you'll be front of queue for those. So it's about coming along on the journey with whoever's vision you're most in tune with, and going and taking that step to evolve yourself and evolve that company to be ahead of your peers. So it's a hard one though.
Yeah, I think really. Please go ahead, Rob.
I think one of the key things here is it's really a question of, is the financial institution ready? Because what we're starting to see now is, if you can't get this kind of data from your financial institution, people are moving to an institution where they can get this kind of data. So I think the banks and the financial institutions that don't want to allow access are going to start having a hard time keeping these large family office clients.
Yeah, I think there's definitely that thing of coming along on the journey, right? At some point you have to move. The market is moving. The way that operations are working is changing. And ultimately, it's about finding the right partnership for a family office, one that suits your needs, and ensuring that you really are sort of positioning yourself as a allied partner with these nimble companies that are sort of growing. On to Todd's question, which I think is also particularly interesting. So how should RIAs support small family offices that are not big enough to have internal solutions? Maybe a sub, 50 million family office. There's obviously questions around what is the ideal size for a family office? What are the economics around that? It'd be interesting to hear someone's point of view on that. Perhaps Guillaume, or do you have a point of view on that?
I'm really sorry, but RIA, I don't know what it means. I think it's either pure American or so I don't think I'm really able to answer this.
I think, Kyle, this is really why multifamily offices exist. I think in the U.S. anyway, probably anywhere in the world, if you don't have $500 million, it's going to be really hard to create a true family office. I mean, you can, but you're going to have to outsource different things. And I think the whole multifamily office industry in the United States and around the world exists to serve these types of families. And I think what the RIA has to do is figure out what are all the services that a family office provides. And, being a money manager or a asset allocator is not what you need to be in the multifamily office business. So I think you really have to understand what it is that a family office does, and then figure out how can you create that service offering within your RIA to be able to help these families that have, 40 million to 250 million feel like they have a family office without having to go to the trouble of actually creating one.
Yeah. And I suppose it'd be quite interesting to hear as well, as we potentially kind of dive into the next section, which is the future of wealth tech and where we think it might be going and how it's changing. It'd be really interesting to hear how you think the role and the shift from sort of single family offices to multi-family offices, are we seeing a proliferation of that? Is the demand changing? Is the appetite changing? This is open to the floor, so any of you feel free to jump in on that.
I'll take that one then. Maybe just sorry for the previous question, but we see like many family offices coming from everywhere, and we were serving like accountants, asset managers, tax lawyers. And we see that many of those type of advisors are moving to family offices services. And I think it's really changing things. The competition is increasing a lot. And we see their business model at risk today because digitalization, increase of cost transparency, fees transparency. And so they try to move on their services to higher added value services. And so I see much more like the market is growing a lot of small players that try to leverage their relationship they have with their clients and deliver like those move from a commission-based business model to more advice-based business model. So I see that, to me, it is really like real. It is happening. We're serving a lot of advisors like this, and that's something that is going on now, to me, a trend that we need to consider.
Yeah, great. Albert, it might be interesting here as well to hear a little bit about what is it that's exciting you about the sort of future of where I suppose wealth tech is heading and how that market is shaping up. Where do you see the real opportunities for yourself?
Absolutely. So I think for ourselves, we've always had the strategy of working with others. I think that, understanding the premise that we don't do everything to perfection ourselves. So we'd much rather go out and work with someone who does what they do best. And letting us focus on what it is that we believe we do best. So I think for us, the kind of embeddedness of multiple systems in one is something that our clients at least appreciate to this extent a pretty large degree. And I think the ability to, as markets shift and, actually letting advisors, staying on top of that. I think everyone in this call see that they have a different business model than a robo-advisor or than a brokerage does. It's much more about that holistic advice and making sure that the clients are understood and making sure that you kind of transform them with the innovation that is happening. And as Guillaume pointed out, that innovation, how do you kind of work with them the best way? Probably by not working with one firm, but finding different vendors that can co-integrate with each other and live harmoniously together.
Brilliant. And maybe, Leo, a question for you then is, what is exciting Addepar at the moment within the wealth sort of tech space? Where do you sort of see the next 12 to 16 months sort of heading?
Yeah, I think, look, there is obviously being in the wealth and asset management space with the increase, I think we've seen 10 years of extremely low interest rates. We've seen assets balloon, globally. We've seen people, want more accurate pictures and projections of where they're at and marketing. And now you're seeing even more volatility. I think it just sort of highlights the need for best of breed solutions to deal with that and understand where you are. I think in terms of our company specifically, I mean, we're in the business of building out data feeds. So whether that's in Europe and in Asia and further afield, I think that's absolutely key in our offering and becoming more appealing to a broader set of clients. And maintaining a core focus on the industry in which we were born. So within the family office space is absolutely key, and not losing sight of that. Whilst inevitably, there are larger banks who would also be interested in technology. It's making sure that whatever updates are pushed are applicable for everyone. Don't lose sight of who your core customer and client base are. I think that's absolutely key. And then just listening the whole time, getting feedback, iterating the product based on what might be going on in quieter corners of the world, not just who shouts loudest.
I think, great approach. I suppose there was a question which is perhaps linked to this as well, which is, what would you recommend for family offices that lie on the lower end of the scale of the global wealth? And again, I think this kind of comes back to that multi-family office solution, but a number of solutions that are either not a good fit or too expensive or return on investment specifically. So specifically for Eton, what's the smallest office that makes sense for your company? What's the typical sort of size that is ideal to partner with you?
Yeah, I think just to follow up on that earlier question, I think one of the things that's interesting today is that this old saying, if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office, which I think people are starting to realize that may be true with respect to kind of the front office, how we make investments, how we do our relationship management. But there's a recognition today that it probably doesn't make sense for each family office to create their own middle and back office process, to reinvent the wheel on how to do reporting or, transaction processing or whatever it is. So I think here, the idea is to really look at the particular fact pattern of the office. What are they trying to achieve? And then figure out how can we partner with other people to create something that makes sense for that office. And so in our case, we have an offering where you can just buy our platform and run it yourself. Obviously that you need a much bigger office to do that, I think. We also have a fully serviced platform where you buy the platform for yourself and then you hire us to run it for you. So we can pretty much fully outsource the middle and back office. That can work for a fairly small family office, a couple $100 million maybe. And then one of the things that we're thinking about or working on is this idea of maybe a administrative family office, which is kind of the concept of a multifamily office without having to have the investment or planning or those kind of things. You can partner with whoever you want to do that front office work, but have a way to do the middle and back office on a shared instance where you can't brand it for yourself. It's just much more of a more economical way to do that. And I'm not sure how far down that would go, but maybe 50 million.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, Kyle, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just to add to Rob's point, right? So I think the problem for a smaller family office is that they don't have the deep pockets as the larger ones would have. But the problem set is pretty much the same. It's just it's on less steroids, right? So if you try to break the problem and then maybe break down your value proposition and offer the components that would really add value to the client, and then bolt on the bits and pieces from other vendors. So kind of like come up with an open architecture ecosystem approach. So client can basically carry on doing reporting by themselves, but the aggregation could be outsourced to, let's say, another vendor, and the planning could be outsourced to another vendor. And then when the financial burden is too much to cope, they can simply switch it off, right? So having that adjustable ecosystem approach could be useful for smaller family offices.
Right. I think.
Go ahead, Rob.
I think kind of getting a paradigm in people's head about, if I lived in New York City, I certainly wouldn't want to build my own car. I wouldn't want to necessarily even own a car when I can just get on an app and get an Uber, and at any level of Uber that I want pretty quickly. I think that's kind of the paradigm where the family office as a service is going to be coming up going forward. People are going to start to think, what do I actually need rather than what do I have to build? And if I can get that activity from a service rather than having to build it myself, it's probably much more efficient to do it that way.
Yeah, perfect. Maybe a final question is more sort of around non-financial reporting that's popped through from Milan. It'd be interesting to hear if anyone has some points of view on non-financial, whether that's ESG, not-for-profit, impact KPIs. Has anyone sort of heard of some interesting tools that might be able to support family offices looking to kind of leverage sort of measurement in the space?
Just quickly on my side, and again, this isn't sort of a general comment, but I think and a lot of the other companies represented in this call do the same, but partnering with other best-of-breed providers who perhaps integrate the likes of Clarity.ai, for example, who provide BlackRock, Aladdin sort of ESG data, for example, and allow those metrics to be surfaced in there, and then businesses like ourselves who partner with those same companies, you can then surface that data in our functionality. But I wouldn't have a huge amount of others of comments on that. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Brilliant. Right. Well, I think that is time. I think it's a wrap. It's been a fantastic conversation today. Jess, I think, will be popping back onto the screen shortly. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Please feel free to follow all of these interesting companies. They're all in the comments below. They're linked to this post you've been watching. And hopefully we'll be chatting to them more in detail in the future. Jess, over to you. It's a wrap.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you for leading another excellent discussion. And to Rob, Guillaume, Sinan, Leo, Albert, thank you all for sharing your knowledge with us so generously. There's no denying digital excellence is a cornerstone of the family office of the future. And there were some incredible nuggets of wisdom shared here today that prove just that. In the context of family office software and tech, we're really just getting started here. And we're excited to dive even deeper into tech in future webinars. We're so happy to see these next-gen faces joining us here. And we're committed to continuously finding better ways to represent this industry best through more inclusivity, amplifying more diverse voices, as we believe this is key for the next generation of family offices. We look forward to welcoming even more people from the Simple Network to join us on stage and share their unique take. To everyone who tuned in today, whether you watch this live or you're catching the recording, we want to thank you all as well. We're so proud of this engaging community, and we hope to see you at the next webinar, which will be announced soon. As always, we love hearing from you, so please share any thoughts or feedback with us, either in the comments section or reaching out via mail. From me, once again, on behalf of the entire Simple team, thank you for being here today. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye.